Yep, yeah. Excellent. Our next presentation, I'd like to welcome Dr. Grant Hewison. Welcome, Grant. Lovely to see you on an entirely different issue than we normally see you on. So you've got, I hear our petitioners are there, so we do want to bring our open side of the meeting to a close by 12. So yeah, maybe the next 5 minutes are all yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, just to introduce myself, so kia ora koutou, talofa lava, salam alaikum. I'm Dr. Grant Hewison. I wear many hats, but the hat I'm wearing today is as a member of and having worked with the Otara Gambling and Alcohol Action Group for a number of years. We've been mainly focused on the work I do on supporting them oppose alcohol licences, particularly in the area in Waiare. Also pokie licences, but they've also been doing work on smoke-free. And they asked me to come and address you today as a member and with their support. In terms of what the discussion has been today, and if there is a presentation that we might put up, one of the things that is a key message is to almost stick to your knitting. Stick to those things that you can really influence. And what is it that local government can really influence in a smoke-free space? It's spaces, it's places. Okay, so where these public places where people smoke and shouldn't be smoking, you have authority over those. You have regulatory powers over those. Okay, the kind of other spaces that you own and that people lease from you, or people hold events in, or that people have their outdoor dining facilities and tables in, are also spaces that you have control over. So the biggest influence that you can have, in our view, in this smoke-free environments area is about place. Yes, it is also about people using those places, but that's where you can have real influence. So we wanted to focus you on that and the concerns, I suppose, from somewhere like the Otara Town Centre where there is signage. It's very old. It was put in place by Manukau City Council. People aren't really aware of where they aren't allowed to smoke. Those public places that you own, that you regulate, that you have authority over, aren't messaging that these are not places that people can smoke. Even the bus shelters. So one of the concerns we have in the Otara Town Centre is the bus shelter is used for smoking, and there seems to be a bit of a gap between what your responsibility is and what Auckland Transport's responsibility is in terms of the smoke-free issue around the use of those facilities. But of course, that's where secondhand smoke can influence or affect other people. So there's a bit of a gap in terms of yourselves and some of your CCOs in terms of implementing that smoke-free policy and those messages. One of the important messages that has come through is around the implementation of your current policy. And it is of some concern to OGAG that there is a very good policy. You've put it in place, you're now budgeting money to support its implementation, but it really hasn't been implemented in the way that the policy outlined. You've heard some messages today from the Cancer Society about the non-implementation of that policy in terms of new leases of facilities that you have for very long periods of time, and also the renewal of leases. These are things you have control over. It's in your policy. It's a question of implementation. It doesn't seem that the policy implementation is happening in the way that it was envisaged, and frankly, from your perspective, it needs to. You've heard a lot about vaping. I'm not going to talk about vaping. You've heard a lot of experts debate that. That's not my expertise. But just to communicate a message to you that the people I work with in Otara are seeing their youth see vaping as something cool and trendy and the kind of new thing that's come along. So just be conscious that that message that you've heard from the Cancer Society has specifically come through from members in Otara as well. Without the presentation, I'm just going to take you through some kind of key recommendations that OGAG has brought forward into the debate. One is to focus the budget allocation that you've got on getting your implementation plan actually implemented. So go back to what did you commit to and what you need to implement to make sure that happens. Some really key parts of that are the smoke-free clauses in your leases, particularly when they're long-term, over 30 years. So you have the opportunity of a council to lock it in those leases in terms of the new ones and the renewals, that this facility, a childcare facility or a sports facility or any other type of facility, is smoke-free. There it is in the lease in black and white. In terms of your event management and the example that we've heard today of Western Springs, you have authority and control over the way in which those facilities are used. They're your facilities. You need to make sure that there's an implementation of that commitment to smoke-free through into the agreements and the funding agreements and the other mechanisms you have to control the way those facilities are used. And outdoor dining, again, there's a commitment there. It needs to be followed through. There needs to be some follow-up in terms of compliance. There's a concern in Otara that there isn't, that the signage is old. It needs to be updated. It needs to be a little bit more widely installed so that the message that these public spaces of the councils are smoke-free. We support the Māori and Pacific Plan in terms of the way it will roll out, and also the involvement of the community in terms of providing opportunities to be involved in smoke-free. I'm going to take a little step to the side again and just say, look, in terms of revisiting a bylaw, we know the difficulties that exist with bylaws, but it is a regulatory power you have. It is something that you can use, particularly where there is concentrated secondhand smoke issues, where there's clearly a nuisance. There's also an opportunity, if you wish to go down that path, under the Litter Act, to make bylaws as well. And of course, in terms of the litter from cigarette butts, quite a considerable amount of the plastic pollution that's ending up in our oceans are cigarette butts. So again, you have the power there to take some steps in that direction if that's something you wish to consider going forward. And finally, Mr. Mayor, in terms of targeted rates, and you probably don't want to hear a message about targeted rates, but there are opportunities for far more targeted rates. And perhaps in this space, there's an opportunity for a targeted rate on the retailers of tobacco products to actually pollution pays to pay for a contribution to the council's coffers so it can have an ongoing budget to support these kinds of smoke-free initiatives, and that the $2 million isn't spent, stops, and we go back down to no budget. So again, something to think about, just to put on the table. Thank you very much for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can answer within my scope of ability.
Thank you, Grant. That's an interesting one, your last point. Now, was that Councillor Casey? Yep, Councillor Casey.
Grant, my understanding is that there's no smoking on buses or at bus shelters.
So your smoke-free policy, as I understand it, commits to no smoking within bus shelters. But it's all about compliance, Councillor, and enforcement. And if there's no signage for a start, people don't know that that is not a place.
Yeah, that was my point. So your argument is there is no signage there to tell people they can't smoke. So there's nothing to help the public say, excuse me, could you put that out?
That's correct. And there is a bit of a gap between yourselves and Auckland Transport about who should pay.
For the signage?
As I understand it.
Okay. It's another one for the scribes. Yeah.
It is, and that's, I think, will also form part of our next financial discussions, because you'll remember that we looked at the budget for all signage everywhere, and the add up button was huge, and I think that'll be a good question we can just ask our staff when we get to the presentation from them after lunch. Any other questions for Grant? No? You're happy to move? Oh, Councillor Collins move, Councillor Fletcher will second the thank you to Dr. Hewison.
Thank you.
I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried.
Thank you very much.